Welcome to the Justice Journal podcast. I'm Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert. I hope you enjoy this podcast series where we discuss important public safety issues and provide insight into who we are as an office and what we do both in the courtroom and in the community to provide the highest level of public safety through prosecution, prevention, and innovation.
Welcome to the Justice Journal podcast. I am your host today. My name is Rochelle Beardsley. Today we will be discussing a recent real estate fraud case that was successfully prosecuted by jury trial during the era of COVID-19. This episode is one in a series focusing on the success of our local criminal justice system and the success we've had in holding jury trials in the age of a pandemic. Given this is International Fraud Week, we thought it was also fitting to talk about this case today in order to raise awareness about real estate fraud and help prevent more crime victims. Our guests today are the prosecutor on the case, Mr. Sam Nong. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We also have DA Investigator Jason Halstead. Good morning.
Morning.
We are also very fortunate and very grateful to have the victims in this case joining us. We have Carolyn. Hello, Carolyn. Maria, whose video is blank right now, and Eman. Thank you for joining us today. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. What I want to do is I want to get started by talking about the real estate fraud unit first. So, Sam and Jason, before we get into the case, can you guys give us a background on the real estate fraud unit? What kind of cases do you investigate and prosecute? And give us a little bit of example or context about what constitutes real estate fraud.
Sure, Rochelle. The real estate fraud unit here at the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office encompasses, we have 3 dedicated attorneys. One of those attorneys is dedicated to prosecuting and investigating real estate fraud against elders. The other 2 are all real estate fraud. In our unit, we have 2 investigators. They're sworn peace officers, and they can write search warrants, they can arrest people as sworn peace officers. We also have 2 investigative assistants, which Jason Halstead is one of, and they are kind of the backbone of our unit because they are the ones that do most of the initial investigation, and one paralegal who handles all the documents that we file in court. Real estate fraud it's semi-complicated, but it's kind of a fancy word for stealing, basically. Real estate fraud is, definition-wise, is any illegal conduct which adversely affects someone's title or use of their home, including the theft of money from mortgage loan funds. So an example would be a scammer stealing a homeowner's identity and then using that identity to apply for a mortgage and receiving the mortgage funds and then using it probably to go to Las Vegas or some other lavish spending. And then the homeowner then would be stuck with the bill. Also, another form of real estate fraud is forging a homeowner's signature on a deed and recording it at the recorder's office and transferring that title to themselves without the homeowner's consent and then selling it down the line. That's your typical real estate fraud that I've encountered here at my time at the real estate fraud unit. Okay. Now, the money could come from a lot of sources, right? You can actually steal the money from the actual homeowner, or you can steal the money from a potential buyer who you tell and claim that you're the owner, and you sell the house to them and they give you money for the house and you actually don't own the house. Or you can take the money and steal it from a lender or a bank. Those are the different ways a scammer collects his illegal money.
Okay. Do you know how cases are referred to our office or to your unit?
Yes. So this is the uniqueness of our office. It's that it's the public that gets involved with our cases. So there's really no police involvement initially. It's the public who are suspicious of activity And what they do is they go onto our website and our district attorney website, and they make a report online directly to our office. Usually criminal cases are investigated by this, let's say the Sacramento Police Department or the Sheriff's Department, and then they send the case to us to handle. And real estate fraud is very unique, it's different. It's the public who has a hands-on approach, and they're the ones that see and hear about the suspicious conduct or are the victims of suspicious conduct, and they report it to us. So there's our website that you could go to at us. I could get it to them at the end, but there's a website that the public can go to, our website, and click on the link, report fraud. And once we get the report, Jason Halstead or another investigative assistant does the initial investigation on that.
Okay. So our website is www.sacda.org. We're going to go ahead and put it on our screen here for everyone who's listening and watching, so that you can access the link that Sam has mentioned, which is the report fraud link. Is that correct, Sam?
Yes, it is.
Great. Okay. Jason, I want to turn to you for a little bit. Sam's been talking a little bit about what the various assignments that you have, which sounds like a lot. Tell us about what specific role you have and what type of assignments or duties that carries with it.
Okay. So once those complaints come into our office, they are reviewed by our paralegal and possibly discussed with our supervising DA. At that point, if there needs to be further investigation, it's assigned to someone like myself. Once I get the case, I usually look at the individuals involved, including the suspect, the complainants, possibly any other witnesses. And at that point, then I usually determine what property is involved with the allegations. Maybe it's one property, sometimes it is multiple properties. At that point, we generally will go through, do a title search, take a look at the property, see what's gone on with that property in a specific time frame, usually the last maybe 5 to 5 years or so. And then once you have an idea from the complaint, what the allegations are, what the property, what's going on with the property, then at that point, maybe we contact the complainant to get a little more information regarding their allegations. Then I may interview a witness, interview other people involved, determine if there's maybe more victims, and so forth. So anyway, there's a lot of research involved. It's sort of the initial part of the investigation. At times, I'll personally work the case up to a point where we may need certain search warrants done. And at that point, generally, it goes to one of our criminal investigators, as Sam mentioned. They are sworn peace officers that are able to write these search warrants. And sometimes my job is done at that point, but most of the time I will work with the investigator and continue working up the case and assisting them with whatever they need. And I generally have my own reports. If it doesn't go that far, if I determine that the case is maybe civil, maybe probate, something along those lines, maybe a family issue, I will report back to the supervising DA, let them know what I've discovered or what I've investigated. And at that point, then they'll make a decision as far as if this case should be closed or continued.
Great. It's like a nice cohesive unit. Sam, you touched a little bit about what you do for the office. Can you give us a little bit more information about what it is to be a DA in the real estate fraud unit, please?
Sure. So when Jason finishes his investigation, and we all believe, the supervising DA and all of us believe that their crime has been committed, then the case is assigned to one of the attorneys. And then one of the attorneys, if it's me, then what I would do at that point, my duty would be to analyze all the evidence collected by Jason and the criminal investigator and determine which charges we should file. There's a series of charges in real estate fraud. Some people know and some people don't know. The most important charge that we do is grand theft, meaning you deceive somebody and you take their money. That's grand theft by deception. And also another important charge in the real estate fraud case is something called filing a false deed. And I think a lot of people don't know. I mean, a lot of people have bought homes, so they kind of know what a deed is, but a deed is like a piece of paper that the homeowner signs, and it says, basically says, I transfer my interest in this house to the buyer. So if a homeowner signs a deed, the buyer must take it to the county recorder's office and record it to show that the buyer is the new owner. So that's where most of the fraud comes in, because these scammers, they draw up fraudulent deeds and the buyers believe they own this home and they're happy, and it ends up that they don't own anything. And that's the scam. But yeah, I would. So once a case comes to me and we file charges, what I do is I talk to the attorney for the defendant at that point, and I try to determine if there's a deal we can work out, like if there's a plea bargain. If not, the case goes to trial and we put on all the victims, and a jury decides
Perfect.
if the scammer is guilty.
Okay, and then that's a good transition for where we want to go next. I want to start talking about this particular case, and that's People versus Shaun Smith and Peter Halo. Can you give us a brief overview of the facts of the case?
Sure. This is, real estate fraud, like I told you, is kind of a fancy word for stealing, but real estate fraud is actually complicated. You kind of need specialized knowledge to actually pull it off. So in Halo and Smith, Mr. Halo, he was actually a real estate broker, an agent licensed by the California Department of Real Estate. Mr. Smith, he was a paralegal, so he had a lot of legal knowledge regarding real estate. So these two got together, and what they did was, in a nutshell, they sold a house that did not belong to them 4 different times to 4 different people. So in this case, how the scam started was that Mr. Smith represented an heir to the house of Mona Sue Ayers. Mona Sue Ayers is Carolyn's auntie. Mona Sue Ayers put her house in a trust. This house was in Elk Grove. Mrs. Ayers was 75 years old at the time. And there was kind of a family fight for the house, kind of, because 2 parties from her family were arguing over who actually owns the home. One party was Mrs. Ayers' trust. She was still alive at that time. And her house mysteriously fell into her son's trust. And Miss Carolyn was very suspicious. She was very suspicious and she intervened. So she made a complaint. Carolyn made a complaint with her office and said, hey, I think that my aunt's house was fraudulently transferred to her son. So there was a lawsuit. So what people don't understand is when a home is a subject of a lawsuit, it cannot be sold. You cannot sell a house because the judge hasn't decided who owns the house. So this is where the bad guys came in. Mr. Smith represented the heir to Mrs. Ayers' son. So the trust of the son was represented by Mr. Smith, and Miss Carolyn represented Mrs. Ayers' trust. So those are the 2 parties fighting for the house. Mr. Smith tricked and wrote a fraudulent deed transferring that house to himself. And then he sold it with Mr. Halo's help 4 different times to people who were unsuspecting, and paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for a house that he did not own. And they were out hundreds of thousands of dollars. So he had a lot of knowledge as to real estate law to pull this thing off. Luckily, Miss Carolyn intervened. She hired an attorney and told us about it, and we investigated it, and come to find out he lied to all these victims that he was the actual owner. These victims were all related to him. not related, but friends and related to him and Mr. Halo. And that's how he convinced them that he owned the house. And
Wow.
they turned over hundreds of thousands of dollars when they absolutely knew they did not own the house, Mr. Halo and Mr. Smith. And the victims end up with nothing at all. No title to the house, no possession of the house, and they're out hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow. So I want to turn now to the victims in this case. I want to start with you first, Carolyn. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us what happened to you and how you believe it happened?
Mona Sue Ayers is the sister to my mom. And her son, Mike, was the trustee, and he had, under the color of being trustee, he transferred her home and a couple of other properties to his trust without her knowledge. So when he passed and she found out that she didn't own her home and she had lived there since the 1960s, she had suffered a stroke prior and it left her unable to speak. So here she was in this traumatic situation. Her home isn't in her name and she can't really talk. She can squeak, she can make sounds. She still understands, so she can shake her head, yes or no. So she was just hysterical when she found out. So I told her, as the successor trustee, I would file suit to get her home back in her trust. So that's how it started. It impacted the whole family. It's a very close-knit little family, the sisters, there were 4 of them. And they all went through certain emotional distress. I would walk in on my mom and she would just be crying. She couldn't understand how Sue was in this situation. One of the worst things that happened, I mean, selling the property over and over was pretty bad, but Shaun Smith tried to evict her. And we had to go to a landlord-tenant court, and it cost just under $15,000 to represent her. And we did win when the judge found out that the house was in litigation to determine the owner. He said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "This isn't a landlord-tenant case." So we got thrown back and, we continued with our lawsuit. But Mr. Smith wasn't eligible because he was only a paralegal. He wasn't eligible to appear in court. So he had James Chandler appear for him. And James Chandler, I guess a year and a half to 2 years in this situation, he got disbarred for obvious reasons. So it was an uphill battle the whole time to deal with Shaun Smith, the eviction, and Chandler did not appear at any of the court hearings. So, our attorney appeared. We had to pay for, her time and preparation for that. And that went on for a couple of years. They did not appear at any hearing. So that's basically how we got into it.
Thank you for sharing that, Carolyn. I want to move to Eman now. Eman, thank you for joining us today. Same question to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what happened to you in regards to this case and how you think it happened.
Well, thank you for today. I want to thank Sam. I want to thank Jason and Keith and also yourself for providing, hard work to be able to catch the bad guys and stopping these guys for doing more crime like this. I'm a restaurant owner. I work in the restaurant industry, and one of the hardest job out there. I'm sure most of you guys know if you work in the restaurant when you were younger. It's a hard work. It's not easy work. And my brother and I, we work together, long hours, sometimes 12 to 14 hours a day. We work most holidays. We work most weekends, and this is how we earn our money. We're grateful. We're happy for what we do. We love our job, but it is very difficult to earn money in the restaurant industry. We were immigrant from Iran to United States, and if I want to narrow down to how I met Peter Halo was we were looking for rental properties, and we were driving around, and I saw the sign for rental property, and that's how first time I met Mr. Halo. We called him and we set up a meeting to visit the house. We liked the house, and we signed a rent contract with Mr. Halo. That's how we started the friendship and relationship with Mr. Halo. He approached us as very successful real estate agent and a broker. He approached us as he has the heart to help us to find the American dream, which own your own house. And he was visiting us often at my restaurant, and he was a customer. He would come, and he was always encouraging us to start looking to buy our own home. And he mentioned many times that he's the man, he's a broker, and we could own our home through him. And that's how we started the relationship with Mr. Halo.
Tell us about what happened to you in this case.
And so he was approaching us for many months. He was approaching us, and he was mentioning the property in Elk Grove. And he actually took me and my brother to the property and showed us the property. And he brought all the statistics that this is a great deal. This is a very good property to own. And he mentioned if we buy this property in cash, we could actually get a better deal. So he put the seed in our mind and our heart that, first of all, he is the man. We don't need to go through anybody else, and he will provide all the services. And also he was really emphasizing that we should do this transaction in cash, not any kind of loan, because we were able to get better pricing on the property. And what happened to us was we trusted him. We trusted Halo completely. And it was about a year that he was approaching us. So we built that trust. After a year of seeing someone and feeding them in my restaurant and coming to our family gathering, coming to our house because we were renting property from him. So we built that trust with him. So he showed us the house. We took my parents, elderly people also, and showed them the property. Property looks great, and we had so much vision and dream to what to do with the house after we buy it. So we provide that money. We provide that money from many sources we could. We borrow some money to be able to buy the property. We pay high interest and part of the deal to get a loan and pay him off. And my mistakes or what went wrong was here trusting. Trust is good, but trusting a bad person is not good. And so we trusted him. And one thing that I learned in this deal was to not skip any step of buying a property legally. And my mistake was trusting him, not going to the escrow company, because he was telling me that, okay, we don't need to go through the escrow. We should save our money and not paying it through the escrow, because he knew if we go through the escrow company, the escrow will find out this property is not legit for sale. So that's what happened to us. We skipped a biggest part of the deal, not going to the escrow because we trusted these con artists, and we lost everything we had.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. And just so our listeners are aware, the house in Elk Grove that you said these con artists showed you, that's the house that Carolyn was talking about that was owned by her aunt.
Right. My first, the way I found out was we actually paid the money to Peter Halo, and he gave us a deed. He gave us a deed that was not stamped and by the Sacramento County. So before that, I'm sorry, let me rephrase it. Yeah, he gave us a deed without the stamp. So we went to the Sacramento County to record it, and we had some issue with it, so we couldn't do it. That's how we approached Shaun Smith, another con artist. That to add something in this is neither of these two guys will approach you suspicious. Peter Hill always approach you dressed up, nice suit, nice cars. So it will never cross your mind that these guys are out there to fraud you. Shaun Smith was a coach, soccer coach, a basketball coach, I'm not too sure, but they were involved in the community. They were not a stranger. You know, they never showed up with, funny thing is in a hearing in the court, his defense attorney asked me, did he put a gun on your head? Did he hold a knife on your neck to buy this property? And I told him, I wish he did, because if you will pull a gun on me, I would have said, okay, this is not good. But he used his pen, he used his skill, he used his cars, he used his tie-in suit and his friendship to fraud me. And as Sam said, this is theft. There's no difference between these guys or going to the gas station with a gun. So I contact Shaun Smith, and he sent his assistant, and he took the deed and stamped the deed, and he brought it back to us. Then based off the agreement we had with Mr. Halo that we should not approach the property for 90 days after we purchased, we honor our promise. So we did not approach the property for 90 days. Then after 90 days, I approached the property, tried to get in my own property in my mind. I had a deed with me, and I went to the property, gate was locked, and I contacted my attorney. My attorney started the eviction notice on the property, whoever is living in there. I was at the gym, and Mrs. Pushman called me. This was the first time I talked to her, and she was addressing, who are you? I said, well, I'm the owner of the property. And she said, no, I'm the owner of the property. And she was very professional. She was very kind. And I remember she said, please, not again. I remember she said that to me. And it was worst day of my life. I could not continue to work out. I left the gym. I contacted my attorney. I told him, hey, tell me this is not happening to me. So he did the search. He contacted Mrs. Pushman. He got the paperwork from her, and he called me. He said, I'm sorry, you've been frauded by these two guys. And I'm working hard since then to be able to get my money back, but it's gone.
Rochelle, it was a lot of money. I think Eman lost the most in the entire, out of everyone. Everyone lost a lot of money, but Eman lost almost 123,000 of your hard-earned money, Eman. That was years of working, right?
Yes, it's a few years of working, standing on your feet. I can't imagine.
I'm really sorry to hear
really
that.
rough.
There's so many victims, and we're also joined by Miss Maria. Good morning, Maria. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well, and what happened to you?
Okay, my name is Maria, and I would remain as a plaintiff and defendant. As a plaintiff, I'm able to interpret for the Spanish people how to file their their lawsuits. And this lawsuit went to the Supreme Court. It was a bad experience, and it happened to a person very close to me, and I was devastated. I was very hurt to see this person go through all this. And this person the plaintiff had worked for over 30 years in a very good place, a good job in a hospital in the Bay Area.
And Maria,
And so this person, huh?
Maria, you're talking about yourself, right? When you say the
Yes,
plaintiff, you're talking
but
about
I
yourself.
do it like this because I don't want nobody to know who I am. Okay, so I was very devastated to go through all that because worked so many years, the plaintiff had worked so many years at a good company to retire, that had a dream about owning property and having my own or her own property, and have to not rent, and to be close to her family with 3 beautiful daughters that she loved, and she wanted them to come and see her in this property where everybody would have their own room, and the plaintiff would have chickens and pigs or whatever, and have a garden and have space for everything for them to come over and visit her. So it was very bad because I trusted the defendant, Shaun Smith, and Peter Halo, and I thought for sure they were qualified for the job. And I happened to know this person for a lot of years, and so I trusted him. And when you trust the people you think you know, you go like, okay, you're safe. No, you're not safe. You're not safe because you think you know them, but then they turn around and take the money, which is in escrow, and Shaun Smith turned around and bought his woman a house with the money that I supposed to buy my house, my home, the plaintiff's home. And so it devastated me, the plaintiff, because she was left with the IRS, with the state taxes, with stress, not able to sleep, not able to eat, and went through devastating things. And it was awful because there was a lot of anxiety in the plaintiff that devastated. It was devastated, uncalled for. You wouldn't even think something like this would ever happen to that person, but it did. So my thing is, do not trust not even your own relatives close to you, because they'll sweet talk you out of your money, out of your retirement, out of everything you have, with your social security number, with your account number, having banking online. He would say, well, let me get your account number, the plaintiff's account number, and I will help you get a down payment on a house. And that's exactly what happened. And all this money was transferred over to his name. And what did that person get? Nothing. That person didn't even get 1 penny. 1 penny. In front of the judge, she promised to pay back. But when? When is that going to happen?
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, Maria. Let me ask, can I ask how old you are?
68.
68.
I'm a senior, and I was very hurt that and dramatized about all this whole situation.
Yes, and so what I'm
Rochelle,
understanding is
I'm sorry, Rochelle, and you know, I'll lay out the facts for you, but basically Shaun Smith had known Maria for over 30 years, and he tricked her by telling her that he owned this house that was really owned by Carolyn's aunt. And
in
he
Elko.
brought her, yes, and he brought her there and he showed her the house and he said, this is the house that you're gonna buy and you're gonna retire in. It's my house, I'm gonna sell it to you. And it was all a lie. And he drove Maria, if you could believe this, to her bank. And
Wow.
he had her empty her retirement account, her IRA. Devastating. Every single penny out of her retirement account was transferred to Shaun Smith on this fake sale. And Maria ends up with nothing, no retirement account, all gone, wiped away. 30 years of work gone in an instant.
Another victim, because these folks had so many, was an individual by the name of Christian.
Yes, Christian.
Can you tell us a little bit about what happened to Christian, Sam?
Yes, Christian actually is the nephew of Peter Halo. Now, Peter Halo lied to Christian and said, hey, my friend, Mr. Smith, owns this house in Elk Grove. Christian had been living paycheck to paycheck as he testified at trial. And his wife had gotten in a horrible accident where a pit bull had bitten her. His wife received a settlement from getting bit by the pit bull. And Mr. Halo found out about this. He found out that Christian, his own nephew, had come into a large sum of cash. So he approached Christian and said, hey, my friend has this beautiful house in Elk Grove. He wants to sell. Christian drove all the way from Ventura County with his wife to look at the house. And Peter Halo said, you know, you look at it from the outside, but you cannot look at it from the inside because there's somebody living in there. And Christian says, you know, this is my uncle. I have no reason to disbelieve my own uncle when he says that this house belongs to his friend and they can sell it to me. And Christian empties out his bank account. His wife was pregnant at the time. And so his thought was, I'm going to better my life for my wife and my kids by investing in a piece of property and not living paycheck to paycheck. And come to find out, you know, it was all fraud. And he's out over $70,000 that he had hoped would better his life and wiped out in an instant.
Terrible, terrible to hear what happened to these good people. I want to turn to both Sam and Jason, and I want to start talking about the investigation and the case. Can you take us through initial investigation to charges being filed?
Well, Jason got the complaint from Carolyn.
Good job, Carolyn.
Carolyn is the superwoman in this case. She was very suspicious of this activity and she filed the complaint online. Jason got the complaint and he did his investigation. He looked at the title. Why don't you explain it, Jason, what you went through?
Yeah, you know, this one was interesting just because you know, initially it looked like, okay, this is a matter that's being resolved in probate. And typically, our office doesn't necessarily get involved when there's a civil matter or a probate matter, but there was a lot more to this, and that as I started to, I did contact Carolyn, and then obviously then I start contacting other people involved in this, looking at the title, seeing names on it, and Eman's name came up in there. So in a sense, for me, it's kind of poking around, seeing what's going on. But it was pretty clear early on that these individuals, these victims, gave their money to trusted people. And as a result of the matters going on in probate, they didn't ever get this property and lost a lot of money. So this was very difficult just because there was a lot of twists and turns, and there was people involved that we didn't really know if they were suspects or they were just involved because these properties were being transferred. As Carolyn said, this property was originally transferred to Mike, and we're not sure on our end if it's legitimate. Did mom give it to him, or did he trick mom? Whatever. So anyway, those are very difficult things for us to determine on our end. So there was a lot of interviews and investigation before this case really started to roll. And then Keith Burgoon, the lead investigator on this case, became involved at some point. I remember going to him several times and trying to, in a sense, pitch the case to him to get him to look at it. And he had another case he was working on, whatever the case is. Once he heard it, and again, sometimes these cases we have to explain them 4 or 5 times to somebody new, just because there's a lot of things going on with them. So once Keith was on board, we worked together. And at that point, that's when the search warrants, Keith was writing search warrants for bank accounts to see where money was going. And then it became very clear that the victim's money wasn't being, it was being used for everything else, but, allowing them to take possession of the property.
So it sounded like this is several month long investigation that started when Carolyn made her first referral to the DA's office. You start doing your digging and then brought the investigator in, and then you found out, wow, months later, this is what it is. It's the same piece of property owned by Carolyn's aunt that these crooks essentially sold to 4 different people.
Correct. Yes. And those things they just happened over time because sometimes we don't know who else is involved. And then, as I said, you get a search warrant back on a bank account and there's another name involved, and maybe there's some sort of note on a check that references the property. And I think that's where Christian came in, because that was down the road a little bit. So there's sometimes you don't know who's really involved until you get back more information. So yes, these investigations take some time, and sometimes we're also under statute of limitations restrictions. So we're trying to move fast, but at the same time, difficult because there's a lot of obstacles.
Very complex.
I'm glad you brought up the 4 victims, Rochelle, because we have 3 today. There's a 4th victim, and I've spoken to that person, but I believe that person felt so ashamed about being scammed that they didn't want to participate in this whole thing. So we have 3 here. Christian's not here, but there's a 4th one. So they actually sold the same piece of property 4 different times and collected all the money, and no one got anything out of it.
Wow.
Very shameful. Very shameful.
So this is a good base for us. And in addition to this complex investigation and complex case, you end up filing charges on behalf of the victims through the district attorney's office. And to make matters a little more complex, you set your trial, and you actually go to trial during a pandemic, COVID-19. Walk us through that process, please.
Yeah, this is a case of first impression. With the pandemic, jury trials are so much harder. First of all, I was worried that how am I going to find 12 people who want to be in a courtroom during the pandemic? And what I found was I have so much respect for Sacramentans. The jury pool was told by the judge, hey, if you're worried about your health, just speak up and I'm going to let you go. And out of 100 people, not one person put their hand up and asked to be let go. And they had a right to be let go, right? It was a scary time. But Sacramentans, have a lot of respect for them. They really took their civic duty seriously, and none of them asked to be taken off. So we did find 12 jurors, and it was hard because the normal process was not used. We usually pack all the jurors into one courtroom and we pick them and it moves fast. But in this matter, we had to have only 10 people, 10 jurors in the courtroom at a time. And then they had to be socially distanced. So we took up the whole courtroom. Everybody was separated. There was plexiglass on the judge's chair and the witness chair. Everyone had to wear masks. So it was difficult because, you know, when you're speaking to a jury or when you're talking to a witness, when you have a mask over your face, it's hard for the inflection and to pronounce the words without the muffling sound. So that was very difficult.
So did you wear your mask the entire
Yeah.
time in
Yes.
the courtroom at trial?
It was required by the judge, yes.
Okay.
The judge in this matter was Judge Sautel, and he is a wonderful and great judge. And he took all the precautions necessary to protect everyone. And I think the jurors really appreciated that. I know I did. So I didn't have any fears when I was in the courtroom with a lot of people. He socially distanced everybody. And usually a trial is open to the public, but because we use the entire courtroom for jurors to sit in, to be separated, there was no public. But what Judge Sautel did was he live streamed it on YouTube. So, because everyone has a right to have the jury by public. So that's how we did that. So the case took a lot longer than it usually does because of all the protective measures, and the speed was much slower. And what I want to do is I want to really compliment the witnesses, Carolyn, Eman, Maria, Christian, all the other witnesses who they knew it was a COVID era type trial and they wanted justice. And I don't think COVID was going to stop them from obtaining justice. So they put themselves on the line, and they didn't complain. They came and they didn't complain about anything, and they knew the judge had put the protective measures up. And without them, this would have never came down as a conviction. So it was a compliment to them that they did this through the COVID era. The trial was basically compelling, very compelling. And you can see why, Rochelle. I mean, you heard from Maria, her story. You heard from Eman, his story. You heard from Carolyn, her story. And you heard from me, Christian's story. So the key in this trial was the jurors believed 110% these victims, and that they were very persuasive, and their story just struck a chord with everyone, right? As Maria said, when you lose your life savings to a bunch of crooks, it strikes a chord. When Eman loses 10 years, decades of savings that he worked in and hard work at a restaurant, it strikes a chord. When Christian loses the chance to better his life because of greed, it strikes a chord. And ultimately, no one believes anyone's innocent when they sell the same piece of property 4 different times, right? I mean, that's pretty much, you understand that these guys are a bunch of crooks. That's like if you had a car, like I argued to the jury, and you sold the same car to 4 different people, that's fraud. That's basically fraud. There's nothing else that you can call it. So the trial was tough, but the witnesses came. The witnesses told the truth, told their story. It was a compelling story. And the jurors, in the end, they found these men guilty of every single count, which I appreciate. The jury didn't even waffle on any count. All charges were found true and guilty. So that was very satisfying to me.
Sam, can you tell us what the charges were that you filed in this case? I know
Sure.
they were convicted of every single one, but what specific charges did you file for this case?
Okay, so every victim, so that would be Eman, Christian, and Maria, one count each of grand theft, meaning you deceived these two deceived these victims and took their money. And multiple counts of filing a false deed, because every time they took the money from Eman, Christian, and Maria, they gave them a deed. And the deed was false because they had no right to sell the house. So we convicted them of like 6 counts of filing false deeds each, 5, I think, and then 3 counts of stealing the money, the grand theft. So each one was convicted of 6 counts altogether, and they received a hefty sentence by the judge.
All right. What can you tell us what the sentence was that they received?
Sure. Mr. Smith was the kind of the mastermind. He was the paralegal. He was the mastermind because he's the one that initiated the whole scam, because he is the one that was hired by one of the parties in the lawsuit to represent them. So he initiated the scam. He fraudulently transferred the house to himself. So the judge gave him 5 years. Wow. And Mr. Halo, he would have gotten a lot less because he was a conspirator and he helped, but he wasn't initiating in the mastermind. But the problem with him was he is a licensed real estate agent. Mm-hmm. He is a licensed broker. That is a position, the judge said that is a position of trust. People trust you because of that title, and you took advantage of that trust. And so the judge laid into him and gave him 4 years in prison.
Okay.
Deserved it.
Yes, every single day, right, Eman? So yes. In addition to the convictions, those are obviously felony convictions, right? Yes. They were sentenced to prison, real prison. So that means when they are released, they will be on subject to parole. Yes. But they were also, as part of the sentence, ordered to pay restitution. Is that correct?
Yes. And so they're both ordered to pay Eman $122,500. Mr. Smith is ordered to pay Maria $108,000, and Mr. Halo's ordered to pay Christian $70,000. That's just an order. It's a piece of paper, and sometimes victims do get their money. Sometimes they don't, because it's just a piece of paper. You can't unless you find assets that the victims can put liens on to recover the money. That's the hard part, is actually getting the money to them. But at least they have a piece of paper in their hand that says, you're ordered by a court to pay me this much.
Yeah. And it turns into
Rochelle?
Yes.
Is that okay if I add something to this?
Yes, please.
I've ended up buying the house because I trusted my new real estate agent, and she did a very good job, provide a great service. So I'm sure there's a lot of good agents out there. I don't want to discredit all of the agents out there. We met the worst one. But my tip to people is, don't skip this step. And it's okay to ask questions even from your closest people, closest friend. Hey, why is this? Why can I not go see the house? Because Peter Halo always showed us house behind the gate. He never allowed us to go inside, and we trusted him. So, and the other thing is, I was going to add is, yes, we lost their money, but they lost their freedom. Right. Halo and Shaun Smith, they have families, and they're spending 4 years or 5 years without their families. And I'm sure they will listen to this podcast one day. I want to ask them if it was worth it. And was it worth it to lose so many holidays with your family? And I go every night to my family, even though I lost that money. So they could, use their talent, and they're smart people. They could use their talent to earn more money. I'm sure they lost it all to the attorneys and not being able to work. And so hopefully for people out there, whoever wants to fraud somebody will listen to this, think twice. You get caught, Sam will come after you. And And you end up with more Shaun and Peter handle that, county jail or prison.
Good advice. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you, what, now that we know what the defendants were convicted of and the sentence they received, I want to know from each one of you, what were your thoughts and emotions when the verdicts were handed down? What about you, Carolyn?
I was overjoyed. I for a long time before I found that form on the DA website, we were going through a feeling of hopelessness. How can we get help? We know this is wrong, but what can we do? We did call the DA's office and they said they don't take referrals from the public. So we just felt like we were left out there in the cold and there was no one to help us.
Mm-hmm.
So when I finally found that form, I couldn't believe it. And I have to say, I am just so delighted and pleased and appreciative of the competence of Sam and his team, Jason and Keith, just how they brought this all about. So I was so relieved when I heard the verdict. I was so relieved. I was so happy. We had a crying fest and champagne.
Very good. Very good. Maria, can you tell us how you felt after the verdicts came down?
Oh gosh, I was so happy. I waited 7 years through sickness, through worry, stress, just to hear that. I waited all this time. And it was very hard for me because that dream collapsed right in front of my face. I was very hurt to think that someone like that could get away with what Shaun did.
Mm-hmm.
I was very hurt. Let me tell you something. I help Spanish people stand up for their rights to interpret for them, for donations only. I can help fill the paperwork for them, stand up with them in front of the judge and interpret for them, because that's my calling. My calling in this world, this is what it is.
Thank you, Maria.
Not to trust people,
Mm-hmm.
not to put your money, not to say in the computer, oh, you want $100,000 and they ask for your account number. No, never you do that, no matter who it is or who's calling you, a smooth operator or the ones that will take everything from you.
Right. That's what Maria was talking about, phishing scams, right? Never give your information or any personal information to anybody who's just calling you cold. So thank you. That is good advice. We're also going to be running a couple of specials during Fraud Week too. Some good tips for consumers. So watch out for that, folks. Eman, can I turn to you now? Can you tell us about what your thoughts were when you heard the verdict?
Well, as Maria said, we were waiting many years for that moment. And unfortunately, because of the COVID, we could not have my parents or my brother with me in the courthouse. But they were waiting patiently. We ended up having wonderful dinner together and talked about it. And so grateful for justice to being served, because we give up. I give up many, many times. Keith, Morgan, Jason, these people are good people. These people, they called me so many times and said, hey, we're thinking about you guys, and we won't give up. We prayed so much for these folks because that was our only people out there. I'm not a criminal. I could not go after these people, so I had to go after them. So we were very, very grateful. Judge was pretty firm, and we were very grateful. And hopefully this will be a lesson for people out there to not doing what they did. And thank you for asking me that question. We're very grateful to see that.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Eman. You talked about the fact that although the verdict was a good was a good ending, you couldn't share that with your parents and your family because they couldn't be in the courtroom. Were
Right.
you in the courtroom when the verdict was read?
Yes, I was in the courtroom, and it was awesome. You know, they had top two attorneys. I'm not saying they're top two attorneys, but they had attorneys fighting for them. And all I actually, I told the judge, I wish instead of spending this money with attorneys, they will pay back their victims. And just simple words, say, hey, we're sorry. And I was talking to Christian this morning before the podcast, and I asked him, hey, he said he can't be here, but I asked him, do you want me to address anything on your behalf? And as Sam mentioned, Christian is Peter Hills as his uncle.
Yeah.
So he tore apart the family, and because of money, I will never do that. I'm not sure so many people want to destroy their family for the money. You could earn that money in a very honest way.
Yeah, on that note, Rochelle, I spoke with Christian this morning, so he wanted me to express some stuff to the panel here, but basically it hit extra hard on him because now that Christian had the courage to come to court to tell the truth, he's been perceived as the villain because he actually had the courage to tell the truth. And it's hard for him now. It's hard for him, but he knows that he did the right thing. That
He did.
He had to testify because what his uncle did to him and the others was absolutely wrong. And he's suffering extra today because they still blame him to this day for telling the truth. If you could believe that, you know, blaming him for being a victim of a scam and losing his entire savings, and also blaming him for telling the truth. It's just incredible.
It's collateral. There's a lot of suffering and a lot of collateral consequences based on sometimes a single bad act, which we know from working in the criminal justice system, unfortunately.
Yes.
I want to thank everybody again for sharing your experience. And we've gotten a lot of great tips from the victims. I want to turn to Sam and Jason as well. What are the takeaways from what you learned during this investigation? What happened to these good folks? Share with us, because this is an episode where we want to raise awareness about real estate fraud and to prevent more victims from being targeted by these individuals. Tell us, are there red flags, tips, or resources that you can share with our viewers?
The number one tip, I think the number one thing that the public needs to get out of this is never purchase a house without a title company involved. The title company, people don't know this, but the title company doesn't work for anybody. They are kind of the neutral third party, and they're the referee. The title company is the referee for the buyer and the seller. So the title company will do a lot of work, and they will dig and dig and dig, and they will then tell you for sure 100% that the seller is who they claim to be and they have a right to sell it. In this case, that was part of the scam. Mr. Smith and Mr. Halo targeted people that they knew trusted them. That way, when it doesn't go through escrow, because none of these sales went through escrow, and that was by design. Because if it did go through escrow, like Eman said, the escrow title company would have said, no, they aren't the real owners. So that is the number one lesson for the public. Never buy or sell a house without an escrow. Secondly, another thing is never buy a house where the purported owner says that you can't see the house. Okay, I don't think anybody else would have fallen for this. If you were just a stranger, like if these guys tried to sell the house to me, I don't know these guys, I would have been like, I don't trust these guys. Why would they not want me to see the house before I buy it? That is the second most important red flag. And those are the two most important things that I think everyone should take out of this. Jason?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the title company's there to make sure that everything looks proper. It's not an expense that most people can't afford. It's usually $1,000, $1,500. but it's the insurance that they provide. So if something goes wrong in the transaction, that title company will insure it, and you will get your money back. And the individuals, the victims in this case, did not know that, because obviously the suspects preyed on them because of that. They knew that they didn't know the intricacies of the real estate transactions. But as Sam said, that's just a step you don't want to skip. So, unless you're a professional, you've been doing this for years to the public, don't ever skip the little things like that. Trust your gut. That's another thing. As some of the victims, at least Eman said that, there's weird feelings you get in your gut, and that's always something that you trust across the board. I want to say that personally, I do this for these people. Like, I understand these transactions are very complicated. The language is tough, but I enjoy helping people and trying to unfold all of this, because when these criminals know what they're doing and hide certain things from their victims. I like to try to figure that out. And but yeah, just trust your gut. That's the main thing. Trust your gut. Don't skip steps. Things don't feel right, then this is your life savings. This is a big investment. So don't ignore those feelings you get, or those small little steps that we're referring to.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Sam, for those tips. I know that Eman also echoed what you said, Jason, about not skipping steps. That's obviously very, very important and good to come out of this podcast with. Can Maria, Carolyn, do you guys have any other tips that you want to share with our viewers as well?
Yes, I know that I learned a big lesson because I didn't go for a title search, and because I didn't know what the rules were, or what I had to do first. And the thing is that I learned it the hard way, and now it's hard for me to trust anybody. But trust the people that are in the law office. I like to thank Sam and Keith and Jason, because they were very nice to me and explained everything to me, which I don't know the law very much, but they did a great job. I want to compliment them. They did a great job, and I stood up for my rights. Never be afraid to stand up for your rights, even though you have proof of everything you got in paper. You have proof, you're going to win that case, but it's always an if. And I like to thank the jurors that were there, because they knew, and they had the proof that we were in this scam from these people that didn't care about nothing but themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. Carolyn, Eman, any last tips before we move to close our podcast here?
Well, I've been giving this a lot of thought, and the only reason I know about title insurance is because I was married to a real estate agent. This isn't something that is really well known, but never buy property, even $5,000 worth, without title insurance. But how you get that out to the public, I don't know. I think if everyone would just remember, when you're dealing in cash, always get a receipt or a contract and get an independent attorney to review it.
Mm-hmm.
Good advice. Good advice.
Yeah. I also want to thank everyone again, because, hearing Eman's story, hearing Maria's story, and Christopher's story, we also suffered a financial loss, but we did get it back. Well, we didn't get reimbursed, but we did get the the property sold. So we're not suffering as they did. And my heart just goes out to them. I hope they can get restitution. I really pray for that.
Thank you. Thank
Well,
you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I want to thank you.
Rochelle?
I'm sorry, man, go ahead.
Well, no more tips. I think they cover everything, but I found a lot of good friends in this, trouble. I found Jason, Keith, Sam, Mrs. Fishman. We had many phone calls, and we were actually thinking about the date to see Shaun Smith and Peter Halo in the orange uniform. Mrs. Fishman, do you remember our conversation? We had we had so many conversation, and we pray for each other. We were comforting each other. So I lost one friend, which I'm glad I did, but I found 5-6 more good friends.
Yes, I do remember. And I treasure those telephone conversations with you, Eman.
Good to see you.
They were very enlightening.
I love it. We're ending on a silver lining. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sam and Jason, for all your hard work, all your great work on this case.
Amen.
And the helpful information on how to detect these types of scams. I want to give a special thanks, obviously, to Carolyn, Eman, Maria, and Christian. I know you're out there working. Thank you for sharing your personal stories with us. And what you did today is help protect other people, help prevent something like this from happening to them. So thank you very, very much for what you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, also.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find all of the Justice Journal podcasts on our website at sacda.org, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube.